Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War Frontline update for the 26th of October 2023. Pause the video if you want to know what the lines on my map mean. I've been pretty busy today with trying to do my third video for the Israel-Palestine conflict, and I've had to rely on JR, what a legend, to do the mapping today. So thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. As someone said, he's the backbone to what I do. And I have to say, Grimsoft, who does the Discord server, which I haven't even had time to dip into recently, is also just doing a remarkable job. So thank you so much to those two individuals. Okay. The northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea has a few areas of Russian advance. We have Suriyat maps saying that the Russian army's made some advances west of Orliansky there. Not huge, but still incrementally making some gains, the Russians in the area. Kenneth Gregg, the Finnish fighter in Ukraine, although he's doing charity work now, says the Russians advanced along a tree line northwest of Vremivka. Our artillery targeted their positions north of the same settlement, revealing another advance of the Russians in the area. Ukrainian General Staff report of repelled attacks in the vicinity of Sinkivka, Petropavlivka, Vremivka, and Nadia. So that's to say there's activity around Sinkivka there, as we've just seen in Yehidne, Vremivka area, and then Petropavlivka as well up there. And then we come down to Nadia here, near Ryhorodka, repelled attacks there. And then at Mikivka, we have Andrew Perpetua claiming that the Russians have made some gains towards Mikivka. The Russians have previously claimed that they were within 600 meters of Mikivka. That's unlikely, but they are definitely incrementally moving towards the west. Of course, they have intentions of making it not here but further up north to Borova, but basically the Oskil River all along here. The amount of manpower and equipment they need to take that whole area is just, I think, unrealistic given how many losses they take on a weekly basis all along the front lines. But anyway, that is what the claims are concerning the northeastern axis. Not a lot to be said about Bakhmut. There is, one presumes, continued momentum for the Ukrainians in the Bakhmut area, but there's not too much to report. Kenneth Gregg, broadly repeating the General Staff claims, says our troops cleared a tree line along the railway north of Klishchiivka, and our forces have advanced beyond Avdiivka towards Avdiivka. The General Staff report repulsed attacks in the vicinity of Bodivka, Ivanivska, Klishchiivka, and Avdiivka. That is to say that they had cleared some of the area to the north of Klishchiivka there, but yeah, they are pushing towards the east, but no changes to the mapping there. Andrew Perpetua does have some changes along the canal much further south of Zaporizhia on the bend of the canal here in the tree lines. Some gains for the Russians there. I don't know the details of that particularly. I have to wait till I see his next Frontline update live stream, but that is towards Mayorska there. Anyway, we'll come down to Avdiivka, which is where most of the conversation will be centered today. A lot of activity, particularly to the north of Avdiivka, as according to all the mappers, really. We've got actually, Suriyat Maps hasn't shown any increase, but they are in alignment with each other, the mappers. Deep State Map has some gains for the Russians in the middle, but maybe gains for the Ukrainians, or at least rejigging in all cases in the Ukrainians' favor near the slag heap and further north as well. But generally, it seems like that railway line is the front line, or at least where the Russians are able to dig themselves in and have their defensive line. It is a bit of a worry for the Ukrainians because there was previously this open land. There is a slag heap in a way, but really, with the eyes in the sky that Ukrainians had, the drones active, they could easily see what was going on all around here, and they could spot their artillery to hammer the Russian equipment that was trundling across this ground. But now, possibly with a lack of ammunition, and with the Russians having incrementally gained land up until this point, it's now a bit of a different situation. It is very close to the coke plant for the Russians. This will be a somewhat easier attack for them to do, at least as far as not being too vulnerable in the open. There are tunnels as well, and I don't know whether the tunnels go from the slag heap to the coke plant, and I wonder whether they will play a part. Kenneth Gregg says about Avdiivka, the Russians crossed the railway line north of Krasnohorivka and tried to advance towards Vremivka. Our forces launched a counter-attack and retook previously lost positions around the railway northeast of Stepover. So that is around here. Possibly the deep state map changes reflect that counterattack. I don't know. The attack was the Russians raised their flag on a northern part of the slag heap, and they seem to have control over at least half of the slag heap. They also tried to advance towards Pervomaisky in the southeast of Avdiivka. The attack was detected in time and repelled by the 59th Motorized Rifle Brigade. The General Staff reports repulsed attacks in the vicinity of Avdiivka, Stopover, Tonyenka and Severny, that's to the south of Avdiivka. There was also information that the Russians are bringing in even more troops, so we should expect ours to retreat a little to more strategic defensive positions. We should remember this was our strategy also in the north when they tried to take Kupiansk, so there's no real danger on the way. He said, so a very positive outlook there for Kenneth Gregg. Well, let's go to what Butasov, the journalist in the area, says. He's saying that actually things are pretty hairy there. It's escalated. It's possibly a bit of a knife edge. He says, a battle for Avdiivka, due to heavy losses, the Russians transferred reserves and continued the offensive. This situation has escalated. On the 25th, the Russian command continued its assaults along the entire perimeter of the defense of Avdiivka and along a narrow corridor from the village of Krasnohorivka to the north of the city, and that's the worrying area I was talking about. The Russian infantrymen were shelled with all kinds of weapons. The enemy was well seen. The Russians rotated and replaced the knocked-out assault units and threw reserves into battle. Units of the 110th Mechanized Brigade successfully repelled all attacks directly on Avdiivka, but the situation north of Avdiivka seriously worsened. Despite heavy losses, the Russian assault units north of the town advanced along the railway track, occupied an area of up to 1 kilometer wide, trying to expand the control corridor and create conditions for the concentration of forces and further offensive in the direction of Stepover and Berdichi. So that's here towards these settlements, so consolidating this area. He continues and in the direction of the industrial zone of the Avdiivka coke plant. This is a very serious threat that needs maximum attention. The enemy hopes to gain a foothold in the factory building and gain a bridgehead to enter the city. To the south of Avdiivka, Russian troops continued their attacks with the aim of seizing a sand quarry near the village of Opitny. So let's just go and check where that is. So activity to the south, although no changes to the map, and this is a sand quarry that the Russians are wanting to take control of. The Russians have been pushed back a little bit, as according to Deep State map yesterday, in this area as they're fighting towards Sarka Ohota, the restaurant area there. So we'll see how that turns out as we go forward. Anyway, to finish this, since the rate of losses for the Russian group near Avdiivka is unacceptable, the Russian command withdraws significant forces from the Kupiansk direction to continue the infantry attacks. Avdiivka has much more strategic importance for Ukraine than even Bakhmut. The Russian command will want to show success here at any cost. The tactical situation for the destruction of Russian assault formations is very favourable, but our advantages must be realised in full. It is not the number of people in uniform that can stop the Russian infantry, and not the number of different units and flags on the map, but qualitatively organised, coordinated and controlled fresh units. And all such reserves are needed right here in order to destroy the Russian precisely in the narrow corridor in which they are fighting. I hope that all the necessary reserves that we have will be directed to the Avdiivka district. The situation there is escalating, and there is a battle going on in which the enemy is throwing its main forces, a battle that we, if necessary, have every chance of winning if we concentrate our forces, but this requires quick, timely and systematic actions, not words and wishes. Really serious stuff here as far as he sees it, and that narrow corridor appears to be here, and he claims that the Ukrainians need to throw in fresh reserves in order to push the Russians back, and it can be done, it just needs to be done in a timely fashion. As far as the ISW says of the area, nothing we haven't already sort of talked about. They say geolocated footage published on the 24th, so a couple of days old, indicates that Russian forces have advanced northwest of Krasnohorivka. I'm not going to show that geolocated footage, but yeah, it's pretty much where the lines are is where I'd agree. Now, Stupin, the Ukrainian spokesperson, has said that on, again, 24th, the frequency of Russian assaults near Avdiivka has decreased, but they are still pressuring. A prominent Russian mill blogger claimed that Russians have made serious tactical success in that area on the approaches to Avdiivka and near Stepova, and advanced to the railway line north of Avdiivka, and they are advancing from Krasnohorivka to Novokolonyove as well, says one mill blogger. So that's in this direction as well, to the north. Haven't seen any evidence of that elsewhere, but that is a claim that's out there. Ukrainian Avdiivka city head denied claims that Russian forces control the waste heap and stated that the waste heap is a contested grey area. I would disagree with that personally. Another Ukrainian military observer claimed on the 25th that Wagner Group remnants are fighting near Avdiivka, and that is something that I talked about. There was a Wagner flag found with a destroyed group. Whether it means it was actually Wagner or just they happen to have a flag, I don't know. And then the ISW goes on to talk about basically Tatarigami's claims analysis on there being at least 109, definitely geolocated, 109 vehicles destroyed, but probably 200 vehicles destroyed in the area, which is what I've talked about a lot recently. And the Russian mill blogger claimed that the Ukrainian forces counterattacked at Berdichi area. So that could be what Kenneth Gregg was referring to in possibly pushing back here. Not 100% sure though. So anyway, that's Avdiivka. I would generally agree that it is, it is not easy for the Ukrainians, and it is possibly a tipping point right now. They need to, if they want to secure Avdiivka defensively, they will need to deal with particularly the northern sector, where, as I said yesterday, the Russians are employing a Pyrrhic victory approach, but of course that will leave them very weak going forward and ripe for a counterattack for the Ukrainians. Anyway, we're going to move on down. There is still activity between Avdiivka and Vuhledar, Mariinka, Novomikhailivka. We're going to move along to the Velika Novosilka area now, where just to let you know, that's another map for Avdiivka that I think is quite useful. It shows you distances there and how precarious the situation is, given that the neck isn't too far from one side to the other to be closed. Anyway, over to, as I was saying, Velika Novosilka. The Ukrainian army managed to re-enter in the forest area north of Pryutne. Meanwhile, the Russian army increased the area of control over the lakes east of it. Now, this was, I think, this was mapped yesterday, but I was a bit confused possibly, or at least one of them was mapped. Now that both JL's got both of these on, so Syriac Maps must have released that about the time I did my mapping yesterday, and that was a confusion. But anyway, yeah, some success for the Ukrainians on one side and some gains for the Russians on the other there in and around Pryutne. Not much more to say about that, I guess. Rogov, the Russian occupation deputy, claimed that Russian forces successfully attacked near Pryutne and Novodarivka and advanced 200 meters. Russian mill bloggers also claimed that Russian forces advanced north of Pryutne and occupied a Ukrainian stronghold in the area. So that's what they claim. Now we'll move on to the west to Robotyne, where there are a few changes. First one is Russian gains south of Verbove, as according to Andrew Perpetua. That's a bit of a shame because that'll be moving slightly back up the manned trench line here that sits almost certainly in the grey zone. Ukrainians probably more robust control over the tank ditch that is further to the west, but a few gains there. And then as we come out of Robotyne, even past Kopani and towards Nestoryanka, we did hear some rumours yesterday about Nestoryanka. Well, Andrew Perpetua's reflected that in the mapping with some gains for the Ukrainians north of that town, and I guess that's probably under quite a bit of threat. I don't know whether that would be trying to keep the Russians kind of on their toes and redirecting maybe reserves away from other areas around here to Nestoryanka and then maybe hitting around here. That could be a plausible explanation. Geolocated footage published on the 24th indicates that Ukrainian forces made further advances west of Robotyne. So that could be the Nestoryanka. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that Ukrainian forces' offensive operations in the Melitopol direction have achieved partial success west of Verbove. A Ukrainian military observer claimed that Russian forces withdrew from the northwestern outskirts of Novoprokopivka. Well, that would be interesting. So some kind of vague claims to Ukrainian success around here, and that the Russians may be pulling out of elements of Novoprokopivka, but take that with a pinch of salt. As the ISW says, they've not seen any visual confirmation of that. Russian MOD and other sources claim that Russian forces repelled small mechanized Ukrainian groups near Robotna, Novoprokopivka and Verbove. A Russian mill blogger claimed that 2 Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups reached Russian positions near Verbove on the night of the 24th and 25th before Russian forces repelled them. So quite a lot of heavy activity still around there, if not huge amounts of change, particularly in the Ukrainian favour there. As I say, some success for the Ukrainians around Nestoryanka. Keep an eye on that one over the next 24 hours or so. And then finally, we'll come to the Kherson area here, where the ISW states says quite a lot about this. Let's dip into a little bit of it. Russian sources claimed yesterday that Ukrainian forces renewed larger than usual ground operations on the left bank and maintained positions in several areas of the east bank. They claim that Russian forces maintained positions in Krinky and near the Antonivsky railway and road bridges. So just to let you know where all of that is. So we come down to this area from Kherson up to Novokukhovka. We have Krinky, which is an area that the Russians have been pushed back in. The Ukrainians still there. And then we have Ukrainians at the Antonivsky road bridge and the railway bridge further to the east. So here we have the ISW saying that the Russians are admitting that is still the case. Prominent Russian mill blogger closely following the Ukrainian activities there has claimed that elements of the Russian 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, so they brought their Marines to bear, pushed Ukrainian forces out of Krinky, and the Ukrainian forces resumed larger than usual ground operations from positions in the marshes north of Oleshki on the night of the 24th. So lots of activity. Again, Pistepny mentioned, Pishchanivka mentioned, and the other sources talking about the railway and road bridges as well. So activity there, but not really too much certainty as to what's going on. There's quite a lot of operational security there, certainly from the Ukrainian side. But one would hope that they are having some success there. The Russians do have presence on these islands. They are grey zones, but it's not to say that as the Ukrainians are attacking in certain places, the Russians aren't also having their own way in certain areas of these islands. They are still present there. Anyway, that is the Frontline update. Slightly quicker one today, due to although there is quite a few pins. There are quite a few pins. There's not a huge amount of sources talking about what's going on the front line. I don't know whether that is a result still of Israel-Palestine taking up a lot of information space bandwidth. That's the sense I get. There are a lot of people who would have otherwise been mapping that are concentrating elsewhere. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.